Hello everyone. Today I will speak about the ancient river valley civilization, China. The Chinese civilization stretches back to 5000 years ago. Chinese civilization flourished along Yangtze-Kiang and Huanghe rivers. The dynasties which were there in the Chinese civilization: Shang dynasty, Zhao dynasty, Qin dynasty, and Han dynasty. The Zhang dynasty was the earliest dynasty for which both archaeological and written evidence is found. The Shang rule was ended by the Zhao dynasty, which came from further up the Huanghe or the Yellow River. The Zhao emperor exercised a certain degree of imperial power over most of the central China. The Shang and the Zhao dynasties, they belonged to the Bronze Age in China, whereas the Qin dynasty belonged to the Iron Age, and it was followed by the famous Han dynasty. Let us talk about the social life of Chinese people. The king and later on the emperor was considered the secular and the religious head of the society. Under him were the nobles and the merchants, the craftspeople and farmers, and finally the slaves in descending order. The army was important and warrior nobles held a special position. They were feared and respected. The family was a close-knit unit, and elders and ancestors were greatly respected. Occupations of Chinese civilization included cultivation, cattle rearing, and pottery making. Talking about agriculture of the Chinese civilization, the Chinese grew rice, wheat, millet, barley, soya bean, and also cultivated tea that was used for medicinal purposes, and later on it became a popular drink. As far as domestication of animals was concerned, they also domesticated cattle, sheep, dogs, and poultry. About the sericulture of the Chinese civilization, sericulture or the silk production, it formed the important part of the Chinese tradition. They reared silkworms on mulberry trees. For a long time, the art of spinning silk remained a closely guarded secret and became the main item of export by the Chinese during the ancient period. Talking about their religion, they worshipped gods Shangdi, who they believed was responsible for rain, wind, and thunder. They also practiced ancestor worship and also worshipped the forces of nature such as Yellow River and the sun. About the script of the Chinese people, they used symbols to represent an idea. This script has no alphabet, and each word or phrase had a separate symbol. This script was very difficult to learn, and the earliest examples of Chinese writings were the oracle bone inscriptions, and also they wrote on plain silk. Also on religious texts were also written with a fine ink brush on bamboo and wooden pages. They were very fond of music also, and the most famous musical instruments were zeng, irhu, and zayo. These musical instruments, they spread throughout East and Southeast Asia. The Chinese people had stupa style structures known as pagodas, and you can see in the particular diagram also, in the picture you can find the certain symmetry is there. Now this symmetry was applied to all buildings, whether palaces or farmhouses. Coming on to the longest structure throughout the world, the longest human-made structure, that is the Great Wall of China. You can see it distinctly in the picture. Now, the wall runs for more than 20,000 kilometers with numerous watchtowers at regular intervals, and these were used to store weapons, house troops, and send smoke signals. It was built to protect the country against the invaders from the north and formed the northern boundary of the ancient China. It has been declared a World Heritage Site by the UNESCO. The Chinese people had made many contributions, including paper. The paper making process can be traced to China in the 2nd century CE. They created paper from mulberry and other fibers, fishnets, old rags, and hemp waste. The Chinese calendar also consisted of 12 months and used both solar and lunar combinations. Then they also were very well known for seismograph to record the earthquakes which was made in China. And the Chinese were also very famous for their block printing with carved wooden blocks. The blocks were dipped in ink and pressed on paper. Techniques and practices of Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbal medicine were also developed. The other contributions included mariner's compass, gunpowder, water mill, wheelbarrow, umbrellas, and kites. I hope the Chinese civilization is clear from this video. Thank you.
The Chinese civilization. In the Far East, a great river valley civilization flourished on the banks of river Huanghe. This river is also called the Yellow River, as the soil around it is yellow in color. You may have read about Huanghe as China's sorrow. That is because after the floods, the Huanghe often changed its course, resulting in destruction of crops and canals of the area, but people braved all these difficulties. Factors like temperature, climate, ample supply of water, fertile soil, and waterways helped in the settlement and growth of this civilization. The earliest known civilization of China is the Shang civilization. This dynasty ruled over China from 1765 to 112 BCE. It was later overthrown by the Shu dynasty in about 12th century BCE. A rich culture progressed under these dynasties, thus making China an early cradle of civilization of the ancient world. The Chinese way of life. Society. The Chinese society was divided into classes. The king and his family held the top position. Below them were the nobles, scholars, merchants, artisans, and craftsmen. The lowest rank was that of the slaves who led a miserable life. The Chinese society had a well-knit family system where elders were respected, men had a superior position, women were confined to the four walls of the house, the birth of a male child was always welcome, the girl child considered a burden. Family lived like a clan and elders were obeyed. Occupation and craft. Agriculture was the main occupation of the people. Rich soil, use of manure, and an elaborate irrigation system ensured surplus food production. The Chinese were familiar with grains like wheat, rice, barley, millets, soya bean, etc. Tea production was popular in China. The ancient Chinese were familiar with tea, first as a medicinal plant and later as a popular drink. Another prominent occupation of the people was domestication of animals. They domesticated and reared horses, cattle, sheep, dogs, pigs, and poultry. The Chinese were excellent carpenters. Timber was used extensively in their palaces. They were famous for their ivory work on wood and cabinet making. They were also skilled in metal craft, as is evident from the bronze vase of that period. Making porcelain pottery was another important occupation of the people. Silk industry was in an advanced stage in China at that time. High-quality silk was woven from silk threads. Chinese silk was famous all over the world and was the chief item of export. The Chinese were the first to make paper. Thus, making of paper became an important occupation of the people. The silk industry had reached an advanced stage in the ancient Chinese civilization. Architecture. Great heights were achieved by the Chinese in the field of architecture. Walls had an important place in the Chinese architecture. Walls were built around temples, palaces, private houses and villages. The Chinese houses were made of timber. They had thatched and sloping roofs. Each house had a courtyard of a rectangular shape. The Chinese built stupa-type temples called the pagodas. The inside walls were decorated with beautiful paintings. The best specimen of the Chinese architecture is the Great Wall of China. This massive wall began being built as early as the 7th century BCE. Later, finished by the Ming dynasty, 8,500 km of the wall along with 2,500 km natural defense barriers such as hills and rivers to keep China safe from the invasions of the Tartars. This wall has 10,000 towers across the length of the wall. These towers are at an interval of about 100 meters and are around 15 meters high. Soldiers were stationed on the towers to keep a watch on any enemy attack. The Great Wall is one of the 7 wonders of the world. It was the result of a remarkable effort of thousands of workers and slaves. Fact: the Great Wall of China was built between 214 and 204 BCE by thousands of poor farmers. Short bits of wall were joined up to make the longest wall in the world, stretching over 2,200 kilometers. The wall is up to 15 meters high and is wide enough for a bus to drive along the top. Trade and commerce. The Chinese had trade relations with Egypt, Mesopotamia, Iran and India. The main items of export included silk, tea, paper, chinaware, etc. Religious beliefs. Like the other river valley civilizations, the Chinese were also worshippers of nature gods. A prominent feature of this civilization was ancestor worship. According to Chinese, after death, a mortal being becomes a powerful soul. The Chinese consulted oracles to know their future. Oracles were held in high esteem as it was believed that they were in close touch with the gods. As the civilization progressed, religions like Confucianism, Taoism and Buddhism became important. Confucius. Confucius was the greatest philosopher of China who lived during 551 to 479 BCE. The religion and philosophy advocated by him was known as Confucianism. His teaching had a mass appeal and were very popular. His main teachings included 1. Emphasis on good behavior. He taught, "Do unto others as you wish others to do unto you." 2. Admission of one's error is a great virtue. He believed, "He who errs and does not admit errs twice." 3. He taught his pupils to respect their elders and ancestors. 4. He believed that one should be firm in one's belief and emphasized on moral values like honesty, truth, justice, dutifulness, etc. 5. He stressed on good relationships and taught practical virtues. According to him, 5 relationships were important. They were relationship between husband and wife, father and son, elder and younger brother, older and younger friend, ruler and his subjects. 6. According to him, the educated people should set high moral values by achieving moral perfection in their life and conduct. 7. Confucius was, however, silent about subjects such as the existence of God, the next birth, and rituals of magic. These teachings of Confucius are in his 5 books known as 5 Classics. The Chinese script. The Chinese script was a form of picture writing where each picture represented a word or an idea. Initially, there were 40,000 such pictures which were officially reduced to 3,300 standard pictures. Chinese script was written from top to bottom. They wrote on silk cloth with a brush of camel, hence it made their writing look like a painting. Science and technology. The Chinese civilization was a very advanced civilization. They used both lunar and solar calendars. They could predict eclipses. They had developed a system to keep record of the weather, rainfall, drought, flood, etc. The Chinese invented the seismograph and could predict an earthquake. Other inventions included mariner's compass, the umbrella, the paper, gunpowder, writing ink, and kites. Contributions of the Chinese civilization. The Chinese had made a valuable contribution to the world civilization. A rich legacy has been left by them for the mankind. The teachings of the great philosopher Confucius are universal and can be followed by all the people at all the times. In the field of architecture, the Great Wall of China, built in the 3rd century BCE, is remarkable and is one of the 7 wonders of the world. The pagoda temples are a good example of the architectural skill of the Chinese. The invention of paper and writing ink helped in preserving and spread of knowledge. The mariner's compass, the seismograph, gunpowder, porcelain pottery, Chinese silk further added to the glory of this civilization and have significantly contributed in changing the course of world history. Fact: the first emperor of China was King Zheng of Qin. In 221 BCE, he defeated the rulers of all the states that made up China and founded the Qin dynasty, from which China gets its name. The Han dynasty, 206 BCE to CE 220, opened up trade with the West.